So Bill, thank you very much for moderating this. The students are wonderful. And last thing I will say, although this is for everybody to watch, it's primarily for students to ask questions. So please, only if you're a student, say your name, the school that you're coming from, and ask your question. Thank you, Bill, and we look forward.
Thank you, Jack. I appreciate that introduction. I have known Jack by telephone or by email for quite a while, and when he told me that he was organizing programs for high school students, I thought that was such a fantastic idea because nobody else was really doing that. And I think he was really ahead of the curve because the issue now is preparing high school students for what they can expect on campuses, on college campuses. There's been, all the attention goes to the college campuses, but not enough to the students who are still in high school. And a lot of the problems that we've seen on college campuses, we're now seeing in high schools and even elementary schools. I'm not going to speak very long because this is really your chance to hear from some students, several students who are on college campuses, and they know probably better than I do what is going on. But just to put things in perspective, I started following and dealing with these anti-Israel issues in the early 1980s at Harvard Law School. And there's a lot of lessons. So I've watched this over a 30-year period and how it's developed. At that time, you were seeing the seeds of what students now face on college campuses. The anti-Israel activist groups, and they were very small, nothing like today, were trying to form alliances based on race and other identities against Israel. They were outliers at that time, but one thing that was very interesting, if you look at the students from the Harvard Jewish Law Students Association versus the people who were anti-Israel, most of us, if not all of us, went into business and law firms. I joined academia, but only relatively recently. If you look at the anti-Israel students, many, if not most of them, went into academia, and they spent 30 years teaching college students to hate Israel and agitating against Israel. And some of the biggest names were my law school classmates in the anti-Israel movement on campuses. And so what things have developed is now when you're going to college, you're going to face a much more complicated and much more difficult situation than students faced even 10 or 15 years ago, because these coalitions against Israel have been developed. It's now part of the ideology, so-called intersectionality. And I'm sure the various students who are going to speak today are going to speak about that. And some of the questions we'll have at the end will be, how do you address that when you get to campuses? One other thing before I turn it over to our first student speaker is please keep things in perspective. The situation at some colleges can be quite bad, but it's relatively small number of colleges. Now, they are the colleges and universities that we are used to hearing about. They're the ones who are in the news, the Columbia universities, University of Michigan, UCLA. But if you add them all up, they are 2 to 3, 2 to 4 dozen colleges out of multiple thousands around the country. But they are the ones who, importantly, develop the leaders of the future, the people who go in to work for the New York Times and other places. So please keep it in perspective. This could happen to you at a campus, but it won't necessarily. And also, believe it or not, polling consistently shows the American people overwhelmingly, regardless of party, support Israel. So know that you are not alone. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our first speaker, who is Rebecca, and I will do a very short introduction and let her speak. Rebecca Mann is a senior at Kennesaw State University and is a business management major. She's also a volleyball coach. She's the president and founder of Students Supporting Israel at KSU, as well as a Stand With Us Emerson Fellow. She was also a 2019 SSI Activist of the Year. She started Kennesaw's chapter about 3 years ago, and I will turn it over to her and let her describe what she has gone through.